Coming up on Lawmakers, the Senate passes a bill that would allow the teaching of the Bible in public schools. The House passes the amended FY06 budget. And we check in with CapitalImpact.com's Tom Crawford about the goings-on under the Gold Dome. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, the Senate passes a bill that would put a moratorium on the power of eminent domain.
And House Speaker Glenn Richardson speaks out about local assistance grants. But our lead story tonight, the Senate passes a bill that would provide state funding for schools to offer elective courses in the history and literature of the Bible. Today, the state Senate passed a bill that would fund elective classes in schools where the Bible is taught for historical and literary purposes. The bill requires the State Board of Education to come up with curriculum for such a class, but would not require local boards to administer the class. The bill passed by a vote of 50-1. Lawmakers' Jesse Freeman has that story.
Majority Leader Tommy Williams sponsors Senate Bill 79.
I think I've got at least a right of some authorship in this situation because I've worked on it every year that I've been up here, and I've had it in committee, and I've been turned down many times. But hopefully today we can come to an agreement as to what we really do need to pass.
Democrats wanted to amend the bill to make the curriculum more secular.
The senator from the 19th bill would mandate that the school board do a number of things, including mandating the curriculum, etc. The difference is my legislation and my amendment does not mandate it, only authorizes the school board to look at the curriculum.
Is there any way that we could get into a posture of doing something inadvertently that we're not trying to do?
I'm sure that there will be those school boards that are leery about this, but you know, if we can't live in fear of litigation.
I think the threshold issue that the Senate has to work through is whether we want to pass a bill that will meet judicial muster and stand.
But Senator Preston Smith amended that amendment to go back to the original language.
And it differs from the underlying bill in that in addition to keeping or preventing the teaching of the Bible in a way that teaches its proof or falsity, it also adds that no additional attempts will be made to teach regarding the other religious or cultural traditions.
After Senate Bill 79 passed as amended, the Democratic caucus held a press conference where they declared victory.
We are very pleased that we've been joined by the majority party on this issue of having our students have an opportunity to study the Bible in school. We think that this is a very positive development.
But Senator Williams says the Democrats made no significant changes to his bill.
There are no changes in my bill. It's virtually exactly like I introduced it. We amended their amendment to go back to my original position.
In the end, almost all senators from both parties took the opportunity to vote for the bill, for the amendment, and the amendment to the amendment. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Jesse Freeman.
The House quickly passed the 2006 supplemental budget this morning. House Appropriations Chair Ben Harbin used examples from the Department of Community Health and the courts where the House is recommending increased funding.
Chairman Crawford's subcommittee felt that this was something with the incident we had recently, the shootings in the courthouse, that for security measures, we're going to provide these cameras at $350,000 for the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. And that item is noted on page 8, item 8, $350,000. If you'll remember last year with the Peach Care program, the dental program, all of the dental coverage was removed by the department last year. The governor added several of those coverages back. We added several more. The department wrongly said that they couldn't fund those at that time, or they weren't being funded, and so they did not institute them. We are restating our position that they should be put back in place. This legislative body worked very hard to make sure that those preventive coverages were there, and we're restating our position that we want you to cover them.
Asked how the General Assembly would support those who are being cut from the Beckett Waiver program for families with disabled children, Representative Harbin said the matter would probably have to be addressed in the 2007 budget.
That is something that caught all of us off guard. Last year there was proposed premium for the Katie Beckett families, and this House very wisely, I believe, rejected that idea and funded Katie Beckett to what we thought was fully. And as the department moved forward, they made some changes based on federal language saying that we were covering people under Katie Beckett that should not be there because they didn't meet the federal language. So we have some folks who have some needs, and we are working to try to figure out how do we meet those needs without being punished by the federal government.
House Bill 1026, the mid-year budget, passed by a vote of 159 to 1 and now goes to the Senate. Well, following the passage of the supplemental budget, House Speaker Glenn Richardson told reporters about changes to the application process for local assistance grants getting them into the 2007 budget. Getting a bit emotional when he mentioned his own request.
I'm asking for around $25,000 to $30,000 to match $25,000 or $30,000 in Paulding County for a park to be called the Tara Drummond Memorial Park. Tara Drummond was the young lady who was in police recruit school that got killed, who was a personal friend of mine, and I'm going to do that.
Legislators and their constituents can present to a joint appropriations panel Friday, February 10th between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Speaker Richardson also told that press conference that the Hope Chest Amendment, which failed to pass the Senate yesterday, may be introduced in the House.
I was amazed at how much time we spent debating whether or not to have the tough punishment for sexual predators, and the same day Senate Democrats decided they didn't want to protect the Hope Scholarship in the manner that we had laid it out. And I just noted a tad of irony in their seeming efforts to set forth a positive agenda when it's clear they're just opposed to anything that the Republicans and this governor put out. I think it's well documented that monies from the Hope have been used for purposes other than pre-K and college. The Lieutenant Governor himself was chief among those who obtained money to put in that park down in Albany. And it seems ironic that he says he wants to protect Hope, yet he's the one that took the money from Hope and spent it on something other than Hope. Then when we have a vote on whether we protect it and prevent that in the future, he, the leader of that group, lets them vote against that protection.
In a related story, the state Senate today voted to reconsider its action in failing to pass Governor Perdue's Hope Chest resolution. That proposed amendment to the state constitution would have restricted the spending of lottery proceeds to pre-K and the Hope Scholarship. It failed to get the required two-thirds vote yesterday. The vote of reconsideration was 35 to 14. That sends the bill back to the Senate Rules Committee. Meanwhile, a bill to provide for a moratorium on the use of eminent domain passed the Senate today with no dissenting votes. Senator Jeff Chapman is one of the sponsors of Senate Bill 391.
Senate Bill 391 is a moratorium that will offer Georgians some protection on a temporary basis. I had a letter placed on your desk that talked about the narrow scope of what this Senate bill would place a moratorium on. And it's my understanding it is outside of those normal government uses that are important that we need to continue. I don't believe that supporting this moratorium really says that you are in favor or against the use of eminent domain for urban redevelopment projects. What I do believe is that it will offer the General Assembly a time that they can think without the pressure or the concern about other Georgia families maybe experiencing what some believe would be an inappropriate use of eminent domain.
Senator Emanuel Jones also spoke in favor of the moratorium and urged the passage of 4 Democrat bills restricting eminent domain. He said one of those bills would spell out property owners' rights.
It's a landowner's bill of rights, of which this legislation instructs DCA to come up with a process that can be given to any landowner, any property owner in this state, that will explain to them what their appeals rights are, what their property rights are, prior to any condemnation proceeding. And that's what we call our landowner's bill of rights for each homeowner or property owner in the state of Georgia.
Senate Bill 391, the eminent domain moratorium, passed 52 to 0 and goes to the Georgia House.
The House today agreed to increase certain court fees and to extend court clerks' benefits. Representative Robert Mumford explains House Bill 476.
It increases the monthly membership dues of the individual clerks of court from $50 to $75. That would be their personal participation. It increases the real estate filing fee, which is a one-time filing fee on real estate transfers, from 50 cents to $1. This fee has not changed since 1984, I'm advised. It allows clerk survivors to who have more than 20 years of service for their wife to undertake the benefit.
House Bill 476 passed 139 to 4 and now moves to the Senate. Passage of a bill to change the weight limit for catching triple-tail finfish was preceded by a lighthearted suggestion that perhaps these fish should be caught by hand.
Would you accept a friendly amendment to allow noodling of creel fish?
If I can get pictures of it when you go noodle them, I'll accept that amendment. But other than that, no. I don't know if I want to see that.
That, of course, House Speaker Glenn Richardson registering his distaste for the noodling proposal. House Bill 1085 without the Willard Amendment passed without opposition, and it moves to the Senate.
Senator Bill Hamrick wants courts to act more quickly in cases of contested elections. Senate Bill 409 would require that, and it passed the Senate today.
This legislation arises out of a situation we had in Carroll County where the General Assembly passed a bill to change the structure of the school board from an even number to an odd number to have a tie-breaking mechanism. The bill that we passed went on a referendum, so we asked the people whether they wanted to do it before we did it, and then it was challenged in court later, and by the time the court ultimately, through the appeals process, by the time the Supreme Court heard it, the election had already taken place, the new board members were in place, and then the court overturned it, and so we had to go back and now go back to what was there before the election took place. So all this bill does is mainly urge the courts, the trial courts and appeals courts, to hear these cases before the election so that you don't have to go back and kind of go backwards in time, which causes a lot of chaos we've been dealing with in Carroll County for a while now. I haven't heard any opposition from the judges at this point, but we certainly will work with them if we do in the House.
Senate Bill 409 passed 49 to 1 and goes to the Georgia House.
Coretta Scott King's body will lay in state at the Capitol tomorrow for public visitation. The wife of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. passed away Monday morning. Mrs. King will be both the first African-American and the first woman to lie in state in the Georgia Capitol. The public may visit Mrs. King tomorrow from 12:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. If you plan on coming to the Capitol, officials recommend using public transportation because parking is limited. If you cannot make it tomorrow, there will be an opportunity Monday at Ebenezer Baptist Church from 10 a.m. until midnight.
Now a regular reminder for those of you with access to the Internet. You can watch our program, Lawmakers, online. Visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on at the Georgia General Assembly.
We'd like to recommend another website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.state.ga.us. That website is a great research tool that we here at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
Senator Chip Rogers is revising his proposed immigration bill. The Georgia Security and Immigration Compliance Act would require employers to verify that their workers are in this country legally. The changes in the bill would not require employers with a small number of workers to comply, and it would not apply to employees already on the payroll. If passed, the Rogers legislation would go into effect in 2007.
Governor Perdue announced today that Lanier Technical College in Gainesville would open a new Center of Innovation for Manufacturing Excellence. Among technologies to be taught there will be robotic operations. Mike Vollmer, the state's Commissioner of Technical and Adult Education, says this center and Georgia's technical colleges are, quote, critical to preparing the workforce needed for success in manufacturing in the state. It was another busy week here at the Georgia General Assembly. Sexual predator legislation passes the House, but one of Governor Perdue's education initiatives is stalled in the Senate. Lawmakers' David Zelsky gives us a look back at what happened this week in the Georgia General Assembly.
Before any bills were taken up this week, Georgians mourned the loss of Coretta Scott King, widow of civil rights leader Martin Luther King, Jr.
We're also proud that a son of this soil led a nonviolent revolution that brought justice, dignity, and greater integrity to our democracy.
This morning as I come to you, colleagues, I just want to say that this is a woman who certainly, in her own right, will be placed on the same mantle with her husband in terms of her global impact.
For decades, she proudly bore the torch of her husband's legacy. Now, she has passed that torch on to a new generation.
Later on Tuesday afternoon, the House approved a Senate measure to divide Athens-Clarke County into 2 Senate districts.
Clarke County, with its 2001 population of over 101,000, plus the University of Georgia with its 33,000 to 35,000 students, plus all of its extension and outreach programs all over the state, needs to have more representation in the Senate chamber than just one voice.
Voters who won't forget, and I'm sure a lot of you have made your minds up about this piece of legislation. I'm sure you have. You know the way you're going to vote. But ultimately, the voters of whatever district they're put in will have the last say.
On Wednesday, the House passed a bill that would allow local municipalities to post the 10 Commandments and other historical documents in public buildings.
About 3+ years ago, a lifelong resident of Barrow County hung a display of a simple document of the 10 Commandments in our courthouse. It was the copy of the 10 Commandments that day set forth and set in motion a series of events that would forever change my county.
We've been down here about 10 days, I guess, Mr. Speaker, and somehow, some way, I'm a lot more concerned about academic achievement. I'm a lot more concerned about the dropout rate. I'm a lot more concerned about all those people on waiting lists for services than where we hang the 10 Commandments.
Also on Wednesday, 1 week after the governor signed a bill to cut natural gas tax in half, the Democrats released a plan to re-regulate natural gas.
Prior to deregulation, Georgia had the 3rd lowest gas prices for their consumers in the country. A couple years after deregulation, Georgia has the 3rd highest in the country.
Thursday was a busy day in both the House and the Senate. The House passed a bill that increases penalties for sexual offenders.
In Georgia, we believe that this is a very serious, heinous type of criminal conduct that we simply want to be very tough on.
This bill is actually going to discourage families from reporting sexual abuse within their families because they don't want to see their children going to prison for 25 years.
Meanwhile, the Senate got into a heated debate of the governor's plan to preserve hope, the Hope Chest Amendment.
To allow future cuts to the Hope Scholarship, 32 in favor of future cuts to the Hope Scholarship, 23 against.
Is to ensure the longevity of these programs. This legislation does just that.
Both Democrats and Republicans claim the other side voted the way they did for political reasons, and debate was at times heated.
We've got a rule in our rule book that says amendments will be allowed on the floor. If it's only to take place in the committee, tear these pages out. Tear this in half.
Chair recognizes Assembly 13th to speak to the governor's Hope Less Amendment.
We don't need this. We don't need this rule. I can't tear it in half, Mr. President. We don't need this thing, man. Y'all not only have changed them, you've destroyed them.
The Dems and
in past history have spent money outside from many projects down in the Albany area and across the state on projects that were not related to education even.
For the governor to say that he is protecting hope, in my mind, is like the rooster taking credit for the sun coming up.
Due to all the raids and the politicization of Hope, it was at risk of going bankrupt in 3 years. So we went through a process to save Hope, to secure it, and now we're coming forward with a constitutional amendment to lock it in.
The Hope Chest Amendment failed to garner a 2/3 majority vote, but was voted today to be reconsidered. And that's a look at what happened this week in the Georgia General Assembly. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
Well, it's time to check in with one of Capitol Hill's most experienced and astute journalists. I began this week's talk with CapitolImpact.com's national editor Tom Crawford by asking him about Governor Perdue's Hope Chest Amendment. As David Zelski just reported, that measure failed to get the required 2/3 majority on the Senate floor yesterday.
On this one, Gerald, the Democrats banded together and decided to deny them the majority they needed. The Democrats wanted to substitute an even tougher bill on the Hope Scholarship, one that Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor had introduced earlier this session. The Republicans would not let them offer it as an amendment, so the Democrats said, okay, we just won't vote for your bill, and there it stayed, basically a deadlock between the two parties.
As we looked out on the floor before they took the vote, counting heads, it became obvious that the Republicans did not have the required 38 votes going in. Why didn't they delay the vote? Why did they go ahead?
I believe they felt they were in a win-win situation here. If the bill passed, then Governor Sonny Perdue, of course, has a great issue to campaign on this year. And if the bill did not pass, which was the case, they can blame the Democrats for killing it, and they can say, you voted no when you had a chance to protect the Hope Scholarship bill. So I think that was some of the thought that went into that.
We also had another, not necessarily controversial bill, although the debate was pretty long, and that is increasing the penalties on sexual predators. Your take on that, Tom?
Well, again, that's another good red meat issue for use this fall. One of the Democrats who was speaking on the bill yesterday said, I know what this is. This is an attempt to make the Democrats look soft on crime and the Republicans look tough. And I think a lot of Democrats realized that it was better for them to go ahead and vote for it, and it did pass overwhelmingly with bipartisan support.
We've got a couple of other issues that, if not explicitly religious in nature, are religious related, and that is the Republican bill that would allow the posting of the Ten Commandments along with other what they call historical documents in courthouses and public places. And in the Senate today, the Republicans' version of teaching a Bible-related or Bible literature course in public schools.
That's correct. In fact, just as Governor Perdue and the Republicans, I think, are trying to get a little bit of political cover on the Hope Scholarship Program, the Democrats are trying to get a little bit of cover on the teaching of the Bible as an adjunct to a literature subject. They introduced the first bill of that type this session. The Republicans came along and dropped their own version of it in there. And when it came up for a vote today on the floor, you had, I think, a 50-to-1 vote of approval, with Democrats and Republicans once again joining in to pass it.
As we have kind of gotten into the meat of the session, Tom, can you kind of see the foreshadowing of the election process here in the General Assembly?
Oh, I think the election started this week for sure, because during the debate yesterday on the Hope Chest Amendment, you had the supporters of Lieutenant Governor Taylor and the supporters of Governor Perdue, I think, trying to position them for the upcoming race here.
And finally, today in the Senate, there was one of the eminent domain bills that sets a moratorium on the use of eminent domain until the legislature can take further action. Tell us about that one.
Well, that's more of a placeholder bill, as you noted, than anything else. I understand that the governor and his staff are trying to work up their version of an eminent domain bill for the legislature to consider. Perhaps that will come out next week, or perhaps we'll get a better idea on next week of what will be in that.
I think I know the answer to this, but the Democrats in the Senate have 4 eminent domain bills. You see any of them having a chance?
Well, never say never, Gerald, but I think right now it's more likely that we'll see the governor's version of the bill coming up first.
All right, our guest has been Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Great to be here.
Well, the Georgia Senate made national news yesterday, but not for anything senators did recently. It turned out the story reported as current news was a little stale by half a century.
CNN, an Atlanta-based news corporation, broadcast a national story saying that the Georgia Senate had passed a bill that put the Confederate battle emblem on the flag. You know, with all that going on, it was news to me. The hard-working director of Senate Information caught that, called up to CNN and said, "Where did you get this story?" And CNN said, "Well, we got it from the Columbus paper." So Senate Information called down to the Columbus paper to find out where they got the story about the Georgia Senate doing this, and it was this day 56 years ago, and CNN picked it up as news today. So, you know, sometimes the big boys make some mistakes. I thought y'all would appreciate our Senate Information staff for catching that.
By the way, that hard-working director of Senate Information who caught the mistake is Mary Brantley.
Well, the Luella High School band took the day off from school today, and they displayed their musical talents for lawmakers at the state capitol. Here's some highlights from their performance.
Nice job. Coming up next week on Lawmakers, the governor's Hope Chest Amendment may come to a vote on the House floor and possibly reemerge on the Senate side as well. As always, we'll bring you the latest from under the gold dome. Lawmakers returns Monday night at 7. If you missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in Monday morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. That's right, a.m. Now stay tuned for Rick Steves' Europe's Classics. That's coming up next here on Georgia Public Broadcasting.
And that's our broadcast for this, the lucky 13th day of the Georgia Legislative General Assembly. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm Gerald Bryant. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.